United Nations-run schools in Gaza look very little like places of learning these days in the midst of the non-stop Israeli airstrikes that are in their second week. Laundry is hung on makeshift washing lines. Mothers scrub infants at bathroom sinks, and classrooms have become dormitories with desks stacked up and blankets spread on the floor. For Palestinians crammed into this narrow strip of land, there are few places to seek shelter from bombardment. Many have fled to schools run by the UN Refugee Agency UNRWA, which estimates that 47,000 Palestinians are now camped out in the 58 education establishments that it runs in the enclave. Israeli airstrikes have pounded Gaza day and night since the 10th of May. 450 buildings in Gaza, an enclave that is home to 2 million people, have been destroyed or badly damaged. UN officials say that the destruction of residential tower blocks and other buildings has left thousands of people with nowhere to live in Gaza.
على طول كده ساكتين عايشين ومش عايشين وكأننا ناسين شايفين ومش حاسين بإخواتنا في فلسطين. العيد علينا يفوت وإخوات لنا بتموت وما في الصدى غير صوت صواريخ وقصف بيوت والأقصى يبكي حزين. لو كان في عندك بيت وعشت فيه اتربيت وفي يوم في لحظة لقيت سرقوا جبان محتل هتشكي طب لمين؟ والقاضي خسيس لعين عالغدر متفقين عدل الميزان اختل. لو كان في عندك بيت وعشت فيه اتربيت وفي يوم في لحظة لقيت سرقوا جبان محتل هتشكي طب لمين؟ والقاضي خسيس لعين عالغدر متفقين عدل الميزان اختل. على طول كده ساكتين عايشين ومش عايشين وكأننا ناسين شايفين ومش حاسين بإخواتنا في فلسطين. العيد علينا يفوت وإخوات لنا بتموت ومفيش صدى غير صوت صواريخ وقصف بيوت والأقصى يبكي حزين.
Israeli airstrikes have revived a Palestinian resistance movement, which is widely known as Intifada. What is it? Our following infographic explains. At a time when Israel bombs and the world watches in silence, Palestinians are facing a humanitarian crisis with no end in sight.
Palestinian refugee camps, schools and civilians, none have been spared from Israeli violence. The continuous bombardment from the Israeli side has entered its second week in Gaza. Lack of resources has hampered rescue efforts amid Israeli airstrikes, which have been battering the Gaza Strip for days. An airstrike hit a residential area in the Gaza Strip on Sunday, claiming over 40 lives. A survivor said they did not get any warning about the night attack, which led to severe casualties.
A total of 18 people in my family of alcoholic died in attacks. The whole street has been blown up.
The rescue team dispatched over 20 rescuers and several excavators to search for the victims trapped under the rubble, but the rescue work proceeded slowly due to the resource shortage. Many victims are still in severe conditions after being rescued.
Some victims were still alive when they were sent to our hospital after being trapped for over 10 hours. We could save more people if our rescue efficiency and capabilities improve.
The International Committee of the Red Cross says the Gaza Strip is facing a grave shortage of medical supplies and will not be able to meet the heightened needs of local hospitals. The organization has warned of further deterioration of the humanitarian situation in the region if Israel continues to launch new offensives in Palestine.
I'm now joined live from the Jabalia camp in the north of Gaza by Asma Taya, who's the operations manager for the We Are Not Numbers organization, and also on the phone from Gaza by activist Hamza Darabi. Thank you both for joining me today here on The Edge.
You're so welcome. Thank you for hosting us.
Asma, let me start with you. We were talking earlier today, you were on the roof of your apartment building showing us the scene where shortly earlier, a few minutes before we were speaking, Israeli rockets had struck a home. Can you tell us about what happened earlier and what's been happening since then?
I see. So I was asked to go live from a place in which I can show the city around me, so you can see what's going on in my neighborhood or something. So I just told the journalists that I cannot do that because I don't have a high place to use. So, and then I told my brother, and he told me that maybe we can just kind of borrow the roof of our neighbors because they have a tall building of 6 floors. So we went there, and just while we were going upstairs, he told us that he heard that there is a house nearby that it was warned, it's going to be hit maybe soon. So as long as we just arrived at the roof, they hit the first rocket, which was a drone, actually, an Israeli drone rocket. And we couldn't catch that because we were just getting our mobiles and laptops ready. We didn't get that, and it was shocking because I didn't even expect it's going to be this loud or this close to me. And then just 2 minutes or 3 minutes actually later, we saw and heard the other one going down, and we managed to take that on camera, but we couldn't show you that live in the call because I couldn't have an internet connection quite quickly. Actually, it was a horrifying experience. And for me, I always thought that I'm not a person who gets scared so easily, but today I found out that such experiences would actually make me freak out, because since then I can't even stand up, and my legs seem to be really heavy. They can't just help me to stand up. And that was not really close. It was to, it was a house of a doctor, and that house actually is kind of 1 block away, but I could see it so close because we were up on a roof, a good roof. And that makes me really feel horrified about what we could live if we have a near house that would be hit, or maybe our house. And I can't even imagine the horrors that the families who have been living nowadays, I can't imagine the fear and pain they are dealing with when they are sleeping and then they wake up to find themselves under the rubble, or killed while asleep, or injured while there's no machines or tools to get them out from under the rubble. This is just a small scene of the Israeli crimes that we see every day here in Gaza. And actually the people are getting so afraid every day, because each night and each day is just more brutal than the other one. And they're actually calling on social media for a ceasefire, and they're asking people to just find a solution to end all of this. We can't deal with so much more numbers of Palestinians getting killed or injured, or even more massacres. And I should mention that they are not, like they say, they are not targeting, I mean, the Israeli authorities, they keep saying that they are targeting targeting only sites of resistance movements or whatever, but they're actually not doing that at all. They are instead targeting houses. Mainly, they have, in less than 10 days, targeted 1,020 houses, and these houses were destroyed completely, while 7,000 others were partially destroyed or damaged. And also, especially this night, we expect it to be a more brutal and intense one, since we are hearing of Israeli injuries as time passes. So we think that they're going to have a much intense response for this night.
They're going to try and seek some revenge. Let's ask Hamza, can you tell us what is your current experience? Are there, what's happening in the area around where you are?
Well, thank you. And as I'm talking to you at this moment, in east of Khan Yunis, well, I live in the middle area of Gaza Strip, but in eastern Khan Yunis at this moment, there are violent, aggressive, successive attacks and airstrikes are hitting Khan Yunis at this moment while I'm speaking to you. And of course, this has been going on for the 9th day in a row with non-stop. And usually, the past few days, we would experience kind of calmness during the day. Of course, cautious calmness, like will make the people feel kind of that the situation is a little bit calm, as like there will be a few targetings instead of the intense. But once the sun sets, then the people of Gaza would live the fear again, as the Israel occupation warplanes will focus its targeting after midnight, and mostly after midnight will start targeting all the areas of Gaza Strip. Just like last night, for example, 62, of course, this is what the Israel occupation spokesman said, 62 warplanes have raided Gaza at the same moment. Just imagine, like 62 warplanes are raiding 365 square kilometers, full of 2 million people, more than 2 million people are living there. And the amount of fire that they were using against Gaza was unbearable, was unbelievable. And as I mentioned maybe once earlier, that what is happening at the moment in Gaza has never ever happened in the history of the world, not only in the history of Palestine. Because the amount of fire used is crazy. The amount of fire, the amount of bombs that are targeting all the areas of Gaza Strip at the same moment in 2 or 3 moments, in 2 or 3 minutes, they will launch more than 80 raids, just like the one last night. And to be honest, 2 nights ago was even more crazier than last night. I felt 2 nights ago that it was the end of our life. Well, what happens once this bombing happens or goes on, the children will freak out. They will stick into their parents and they won't move. Like, for example, my children have turned into yellow and they are unable to speak. And they are afraid even during the day. And whenever they will hear the bombings, then they will just rush into me or into their mother. And 2 nights ago, as I said, well, like I was hugging my son into my arms. My wife was hugging the daughter, and like we were sitting next to each other in case if the house gets targeted, then like all would go. No one will live to suffer the pain of the others. And this was the case, not only us, this was the case for all the people of Gaza Strip. As the people now, like they are experiencing the suffering of the loss, and some of the videos we have seen lately, that they are targeting the houses without warning. Like before, they used to say that they are warning some of the houses, and even if they were warning the houses, they are warning the houses with a drone's rocket. Like they are giving a warning with death. So they have fired or they have targeted tens of Palestinian families. They have wiped out tens of Palestinian families from the civil registry. So just like the one yesterday next to Al Rimal clinic, or next to or opposite to Al Rimal Medical Center, the main laboratory in the Gaza Strip that is used to do the tests for the COVID-19 as well. So the family opposite to it, like when the house was bombed, like two people, the father and the main people of the family that have been killed, while we saw the son was crying, and it was like he's crying and he's calling to everyone, like, please tell me that I'm in a dream. Please wake my father and tell him to wake and tell someone to stop this dream.
It's as you just mentioned, the Al Rimal Health Clinic. Surely a crime against humanity for medical centres to be destroyed, and particularly at this time with the COVID crisis, that's the main place for the testing for coronavirus as well as vaccinations, as I understand. So it's a criminal act to destroy that place. Asma, Hamza, on the screens we can see pictures of a demonstration that's taking place at the moment outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. Asma, can I ask you, do you feel that the international community is actually doing anything to support the Palestinians? There are countries which are holding protests, and countries, leaders like the Turkish president are standing up in support of Palestine. But how do you feel that the international community should be reacting at this time?
I actually should start by saying that we truly and we extremely appreciate all of these efforts from the people who are in support of the Palestinian cause and trying to take action to do something, so to at least gain so we can at least gain our rights back, and so we can condemn and hold Israel responsible for its crimes against Palestinians everywhere. We truly appreciate these efforts, and we are doing our best to communicate with these people and thank them, and also to encourage them. And to me, to be honest, this is actually giving me so much energy and power to go on, because sometimes in these trying times you would be feeling like we are alone and no one is just understanding what we're going on, and they wouldn't do something to help. But this time I'm so glad that people from all over the world are well educated, and they know what is going on, and they do want to do something. This is extremely new and great for us. So even if some of them they can't do so much, they can at least show us their support on social media, and we appreciate it. I should also say that I appreciate all those people who are trying to create content and share it on social media and articles and videos. They are doing their best to educate others and tell more people in their circles about all of this. And as I said in some previous video calls and webinars, I was asking people to not just share content, but also create it and go to the streets to take action, to protest, and to call for at least the applying of the international humanitarian law, and to condemn Israel and hold it responsible for its crimes.
This must be done. We've got some audio from Washington as well. Let's just have a listen to what they're shouting out there, and then we'll come back and continue talking.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
I lived among the Gaza people for 2 years. I saw how they live. 3 days ago, daughter Kodak in Gaza, 22 of her family members passed away. Murder, that's right. They were killed with a missile. And Israel likes to make it out to me that they're the victims. But are they the victims, guys?
No!
They are not the victims. Every single missile they drop on the Palestinian people is very calculated. They know exactly where they're sending it. Back in 2018, when the Palestinian people decided they want to go back and they wanted to take their homes, what did the people of Israel do? What did the IDF soldiers do? They picked them off with snipers, little children. Hundreds of people died. This isn't just beginning a week ago. What happened in Sheikh Jarrah, yes, it's a tragedy, but it's been going on. And I'm so happy that what happened with Sheikh Jarrah ignited all of you to come out here. All of you to come out and support the people of Palestine.
So as we can hear, the word is getting out even in the capital of the United States, with not just protests in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., but also speeches explaining why they're protesting, right from the very beginning, from protesting the evictions from Sheikh Jarrah through to the murderous bombardment from Israel into the Palestinian territories, especially into Gaza. Hamza, earlier after the United Nations meeting, the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, was talking and saying that the entire situation, not just the bombardments need to stop, but the entire situation needs to be resolved. And he sees it as his business to make this happen. What do you think about the discussions that are going on at the international level right now?
Well, dear brother, I expect that since the day one, there were lots of efforts to stop this aggression, or at least to minimize it and to end it as soon as possible. But of course, with the amount of terrorism that Israel has targeted and has committed against the Palestinians, it's getting worse and worse. As the numbers are furious, like while talking about the statistics that have resulted in Gaza. Lately, like 217 Palestinians were killed, including 63 children, 36 women, and more than 1,500 injuries. Well, this is while talking about like the death toll. And of course, I want to remind the international community and everyone that not to talk about the numbers only, but there are also stories behind every number. Behind every Palestinian killed, there is a painful story behind. There is after or behind every Palestinian who got injured, there is also a painful story behind, as well as about the economic losses and the destruction that has covered all the sectors of life. For example, more than 40 factories have been destroyed in Gaza at this moment. More than 300 commercial stores that were completely destroyed, including its components, including what it contains, besides destroying and closure of hundreds of tourism facilities. As of course, at this moment there is almost no one walking in the street except for emergency, because everyone is a target for the Israeli occupation. The systematic destruction and the destruction of the roads of the Gaza Strip. Almost all the roads of the Gaza Strip have been targeted and have been bombed for the past few days. More than the losses, the losses have exceeded more than $200 million in Gaza till this moment. Of course, talking about the economic losses, I'm not talking about also the thousands of houses, as my sister said at the beginning of the interview. More than 1,500 houses have been whether completely destroyed or partially destroyed, and the number is increasing as while you are talking now. And today I was moving inside Gaza City, and suddenly I was shocked. Gaza has become into a pile of rubble. The smoke, the pillars of smoke, the pillars of smoke were going on everywhere in Gaza. You turn right, there is piles of rubble. You turn left, there is piles of rubble. And every place that they have targeted was not only that place that was affected, but all the surrounded houses, all the surrounded area, all the surrounded neighborhood was almost completely destroyed as well. So the efforts that are being put at this moment, it's not enough. We need action to be taken on the ground, not only meetings or efforts. There must be pressure to be put on the occupation state to stop this aggression immediately, as the condition in Gaza has become unbearable. And it's like, I remember the OCHA that belongs to the United Nations has issued its report and said Gaza is going to be unlivable or unsuitable to be lived in within 2020, and that was around 5 years ago. Just imagine more than 5 years ago, they were mentioning and saying that in Gaza it is unsuitable place to be living, due, of course, to the siege, due to the undrinkable water, due to many reasons.
So all these things must be brought to a stop right away. Hamza, I want to thank you for joining me, and you're right that it's not that it's the stories, the details that are important, and it's not just the stories of those that are killed, but the stories of those that are living, like yourself, under the trauma of what's going on. We think of you and your family, your children. Each of you are valuable, and each of you must be remembered by all those who are watching and need to give their support to Palestine. And Asma, we were talking the other day, you were telling me that you were living with some relatives. You had a 3-year-old niece with you. She's an important part of this as well. Just finally, in just a few words, can you sum up for us what your expectations are for the next 24 hours?
That's a really hard question because there are so many predictions, and I cannot just guarantee any of them. But I would just say that my hopes is that there will be a quick and enforcing decision of resolution to just stop the Israeli attack immediately. I just heard that at 10 p.m. there was a suggestion by Egypt to stop the Israeli attack by the morning of Thursday, and I was just wondering, why does it have to be a suggestion? We don't want any suggestions from anyone, because there should be a law or a resolution, like I said, an enforcing one that would force the Israeli occupation to stop immediately and also to be responsible, like I said, for its own Israeli crimes, and also we should stand together to find a way to rebuild Gaza as it was, and even better, because we deserve that, and because this amount of losses, this is something that we can't deal with, especially with the blockade. So we have to also work on lifting the blockade on the Gaza Strip. It has been going for 16 years now, and the situation has been unbearable, and especially with the UN resolution or decision, or actually prediction that Gaza will be uninhabitable by 2020, and now we're in 2021, and we're still living with the least, with the least and worst and most deteriorating circumstances every day. And if this is not the time where the whole world would understand the situation in the Gaza Strip, then when will they? And also when they say that there is a suggestion to stop the Israeli attack on Thursday, then why isn't it immediately? Why should we have
perhaps
to wait?
What's changing now, Asma, is perhaps the barbarity of the Israelis has overstepped the mark, and perhaps the protests around the world will bring a change. It looks like you had something shocked from outside. I hope that you stay safe this evening. Thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge. Member countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation have held a meeting to discuss Israeli war crimes in Palestine. What's the outcome of that meeting? Our following infographic explains. Gaza's hospitals were already struggling to cope with the coronavirus pandemic even before Israel intensified the savagery of its attacks on civilians in the besieged Strip.
Just 2 weeks ago, the Gaza Strip's feeble health system was struggling with a runaway surge of coronavirus cases. Authorities cleared out hospital operating rooms, suspended non-essential care, and redeployed doctors to patients having difficulty breathing. Then the bombs began to fall as Israel intensified the savagery of its attacks on the civilian people living in the besieged area.
Well, the situation is becoming worse and worse every time. Every day we see more deaths, we see more destruction, we see more severely injured people. And on top of that, we are now also really starting to see severe damage to health facilities and some major hospitals that have been sustained minor damage, but still. And worst of all the destruction of basic infrastructure is impeding the access to healthcare facilities for the severely injured.
Shifa is the biggest health facility among the 13 hospitals and 54 clinics serving the crowded enclave's 2 million people. The number of intensive care beds has been doubled to 32 as the toll of those wounded from the Israeli attacks mounts. Doctors are now reallocating intensive care unit beds and scrambling to keep up with a different health crisis, treating blast and shrapnel wounds, bandaging cuts, and performing amputations. Exhausted doctors hurry from patient to patient, frantically bandaging shrapnel wounds to stop the bleeding. Gutted by years of blockade, the impoverished healthcare system in the territory of more than 2 million people has always been vulnerable. There are shortages of equipment and supplies such as blood bags, surgical lamps, anesthesia, and antibiotics. Personal protection gear, breathing machines and oxygen tanks remain even more scarce.
We are extremely worried by the situation. The intensity, the violence has been very harsh, has been very heartbreaking to see, especially during this Eid al-Fitr time. So we would like to reiterate to the parties the importance of respecting IHL, international humanitarian law. This includes respecting the civilians, respecting civilian infrastructure, but also, most importantly, also respecting medical missions so that they are able to go in and fetch the wounded and save lives.
And I'm joined live from Gaza by Akram al-Satari, who's a journalist, and also in Gaza, Taisir Manassen, who's a political science professor. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today here on The Edge. Akram, I'd like to come to you first. The protests across the West Bank, particularly today, and throughout the whole Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem and Gaza and the whole of the West Bank. There have been strikes today. What is important about these, and what sort of effect did they have?
Well, the large-scale protests that we are seeing in the West Bank and that we are seeing in Palestine occupied 48 are very important because they show the unity of the Palestinian people, and they show also the importance of the issue, subject of matter that triggered all of this large-scale protests, not only in Gaza, but in Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the cities that Israel thought they would serve as an example for the coexistence, like Lod, like Yafo, where the Arab citizens that were living in those areas also protested against the Israeli occupation and against its practices that have been targeting the Palestinians. The Israeli policy for the past few decades was the culprit of the poverty and division among the Palestinians. And now that they have incited the anger of the Palestinians, Palestinians were angered by the fact that Israel targeted Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the second holiest mosque for Muslims all over the world. So the response is not only limited to the West Bank, Gaza, and Palestine occupied 48, but if you also realize the protests are larger than ever before in many other countries, like in the USA, like in Canada, like in South Africa, like also in the Arab countries, where we saw some people from the Arab countries crossing the borderline that was never crossed, like in the Jordanian case. That borderline was never crossed since 1949, when they decided the armistice lines till now. And that seems to be changing the way Palestinians see things, and also provoking the Palestinians in a way that made them feel that further action should be taking place, and that they should overcome the political system and try to do something by themselves. That's what we call the popular diplomacy that is now playing in the favor of the people of Palestine.
Thank you. Professor Mahasan, the things are certainly changing. The reaction to the Israeli atrocities has been vast across the world. And yet, wherever we look, if it's the UN Security Council, we have one member objecting. If we look at the European Union, we have one member, I think it was Hungary, objecting to a cohesive statement, a cohesive view. Do you think there is any hope that that the world is changing its view towards Palestine, and that this will not only bring an end, hopefully, in the shortest time to the bombardments, but also to the whole political situation that is the apartheid system Israel is imposing on Palestinians?
Thank you for having me in your program. Sir, the Palestinian people is looking for their rights since 75 years. And the international community is not doing anything up to now. That means the international community is not able to force the Israeli occupation to let the Palestinian people have their rights, to have their states, to live as any people in the world to live. Israeli occupation is destroying all the rules, international rules, international legitimacy, and everything which is coming out from the United Nations or Security Council or UA. That's mean our people is starting this third intifada now to say to the international community that we are not looking to what they will do towards Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people, against their holy lands, against Jerusalem people, especially in Sheikh Jarrah, and what is happening towards Gaza since 15 years. The Palestinian people want to say to an international community, if you able to force the Israeli occupation to stop their aggression against the Palestinian people, that's okay. But if you are not, the Palestinian people will continue to force to make aggression or intifada against Israeli occupation up to infinity, up to get their rights and their aims.
So much more needs to be done. Say, Akram, as well as the bombardments into Israel and all the killings that we see, over 200 people, over 60 children killed, these are horrific statistics, horrific loss of life. But also, as we go back to look at the situation from Sheikh Jarrah, the evictions of Palestinians at Al-Aqsa Mosque, with the attacks on worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque by heavily armed police forces. Since the end of Ramadan, I've seen that reports say that some 1,700 Palestinians have been arrested by Israel since Israel. So there's also this, an ongoing police action against Palestinians. What can you tell us about the arrest? What sort of things are people being arrested for?
Well, to start with, as a matter of fact, this is not an attack against Palestinian worshippers. It is perceived by a landslide majority of Muslims as an attack on Islam. As a matter of fact, when the Israeli soldiers were attacking the worshipper, they were also attacking the building itself, the building of the mosque, and they destroyed the ancient windows of the mosque, and that reminded the Muslims all over the world of the burning of the pulpit of Umar ibn al-Khattab back in 1969, when a Jewish extremist set it on fire and they did nothing to him. Now the arrests have been continuous for such a very long time, not before 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, but it is rather a policy and a strategy that is followed by the occupation authorities in East Jerusalem and in some parts of the West Bank, where they are trying to create a new status quo in that territory. They believe they have the very right to evict the people from their land, and they have been imposing some taxation policies, allowing them after a while to strip off the right of those people to stay in that land. They have developed what they call the properties of the absent people, that allows also the Israeli government to overtake the properties whose owners are in Jordan or in Syria or in USA or in Canada, traveling for 1 decade or 2, so they see them as illegitimate to own the property. It is about a strategy and a policy that has been followed, and I think in the West Bank there are thousands of people who have been arrested for the past few months, and also there is an organized and structured approach towards desecrating the holy places and towards supporting the far-right extremists who are willing, as they state in their literature and in their practices, to take down the Al-Aqsa Mosque and to build the third temple. So it is a mixture of politics, of religion, and of social beliefs that drive them all, even the key actors in the Israeli government, towards nurturing those extremist ideas and towards supporting those settlers who think that the Al-Aqsa Mosque should be destroyed and who think that the temple should be built. So the severity of the interpretation of this is that it is a state policy. They have been talking for a while about the nation state, and they are going further into that. And what we saw, finally, is one severe manifestation of their plans and their strategies and their perceptions of the Palestinians as strangers. So they are doing everything to evict them, and they'll continue doing that unless a major power stops them. My colleague rightly said that the whole world now is facing a challenge. The political system is facing a challenge. The global UN system is also facing a challenge. There is a structural flaw and a problem when it comes to the UN Security Council. If some country wants to do something, then other country has the power to say no. So the 5 permanent members of the UN, if you are against China, then America would say a veto to any UN Security Council resolution.
Obviously something that has to change, and something that the Turkish president has been calling for a very long time. Can I just ask, Taisir, the things that we've just been hearing, the occupation of territories, the destroying of religious places of worship, and so on, these are surely war crimes. Do you think that they must go to the International Criminal Court, and will we see any? Is that the thing which might change the whole course of the Palestinian treatment? Professor, sorry, I'm asking you.
I couldn't hear you. Please again.
So do you think we're hearing of all these war crimes that are being committed? Is now the time for these war crimes to be resolved in order to change the future?
Of course. I'm saying before the Palestinian people is facing a very restricted situation which is coming from the Israeli occupation for their lands. Israel is refusing all the means of what we call peace process since more than 30 years, around 30 years, when it's the international community is going to make it solved for the Palestinian people and let the Palestinians to make their home or state. But up to now, since more than 25 years, Israel is make restrictions against the Palestinian people to get their right to build their state, struggle state.
So it's time to
international community is.
It's time to draw a line and give the Palestinians their rights. Unfortunately, gentlemen, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank you both so much for joining me this evening. Tahir Mahasen and Akram Al-Satari, thank you for joining us today from Gaza here on The Edge. And now, before closing our programme, let's take a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions on today's top stories shared with the hashtag Palestine on strike. Palestine on strike. Here's what you had to say about it on Twitter. Ahmed Abu Snaid said, They tried to segregate us. They tried to give us different IDs, descriptors and license plates. They've infiltrated, assassinated, incarcerated and collectively punished. He said the old would die and the young would forget. And still we rise. Samira Esmir says, a historic day in Palestine. Palestinians, from the river to the sea, collectivized themselves through the general strike. They defied dismemberment and regathered themselves against colonial rule. Theirs is a revolutionary strike that prefigures the futures of freedom. And Wendy Perlman said, today, Palestinians join a general strike as they did for 6 months in 1936. Today is part of a tradition of more than 100 years of protest against colonialism and dispossession. More than 100 years of Palestinians acting together to refuse national erasure. Now let's take a look at our video of the day. Well, that's all from this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boynes. I want to particularly thank our 4 guests who joined us today from Gaza, knowing that at any moment the Israeli airstrikes could strike close to where they are. I also want them and everyone in Gaza and across the Palestinian territories to know that they're not alone. As we just seen in our video of the day, people around the world are rising up and shouting out to save Palestine. Save Sheikh Jarrah. Stay tuned, as we'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on the top stories and a look beyond the edge.